Welcome to Inspirational Transformational TV show. Amy Whitney here today with my very special guest, David Donnelly. David shares with us his journey. I would even call it a quest through life. He's a seeker of truth, of wisdom, of knowledge, and what he has created with his over a decade of study, well, really a lifetime of study, is an absolutely amazing healing modality called Qigong. David shares bits of his story. He shares information about Qigong, about deep ecology, and a wealth of other information. So stay tuned and be prepared to be inspired by this incredible man. There is so much to chat about today. You are a wealth of information on so many topics, and your journey through life is just so fascinating. So let's give a bit of background information before we get into details of what you're doing today. Now, we've talked off camera. You've mentioned through your childhood, through your teen years, you did have health issues. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably a good place to start. Maybe just your earlier years and build up to where you're at to today.
Okay. When I was younger, I had developed asthma. And it was probably mold related, cigarette smoking related. You know, back then a lot of education wasn't to the public on certain things like molds and smoking and all that kind of things. So I think the breathing, and this is where I'll go to later in the importance of breathing, mm-hmm. and the way that my breathing began to become very restricted began to affect me on a very physical, a very emotional, and very psychological level. And I worried a lot. My mind was constantly active and constantly worrying about things that, you know, a lot of children would worry about. But it was affecting my sleep. I wasn't sleeping at all. I was up a lot at night. But the interesting thing is it became almost like a form of meditation. I would lay in bed and I would envision that I was in my X-Wing fighter, you know. I was a Star Wars fanatic, right? Still am. So I'm in this X-Wing fighter, and I'm going through space. And it was like an escape for me, I guess, but in a way kind of a meditation, like a journey through space. Mm. And I remember one night, this was the one night that was it stands right out in my life. As I was flying through the cosmos, I realized I could keep going, that there wasn't an ending. And as I began to really think about it, I thought to myself, well, what would be there if there was an ending? A brick wall? Like, you know, and if so, what's on the other side of that wall? So, at a very early age, I think it was about 8, I did definitely begin to understand that the universe was infinite. Mm. And now I'm not claiming that I suddenly understood time and space at that age, but it did make, I used to run around and freak out my friends saying, you know, we could just be living in an atom in someone's shoe, and they all thought I was crazy. You know, and that kind of thing. But through watching, you know, something like Star Wars and listening to the philosophies that Yoda gave and wanting to be a Jedi, you know, growing up, the one thing that kept coming to my mind was, what is the Force? They kept talking about this so much. Mm. And so that became a very large part of my focus. Even as a teenager, I began meditating. And my meditations, though, were in dark places at the time. I was in a deep depression. I was becoming very ill. At this point now, as a teenager, I was probably sleeping about half an hour a night to an hour a night. Wow. I was drinking a ton of coffee. I remember my brother saying, the reason you're an insomniac is because you drink so much coffee. And I was like, I think by this point, it's just a loop now. You know, the chicken and the egg, right? Yes. And I think I was driving my mother crazy because I kept going out for walks, you know, a lot at night. But I really wasn't sleeping, and my health was deteriorating. I was constantly going to the doctors. They had me sent to a psychiatrist who then gave me medication that I will admit, he gave it to me out of his drawer, and I was highly overdosed. So I was given lorazepam, The research that I studied after this was that I'm only supposed to take 0.5%.
Okay.
He was giving me 10 milligram pills 3 times a day. There's 2 weeks of my life there I don't remember at all. I have friends who tell me horror stories of things that I was doing. And I completely lost my mind. Somewhere in there I had a moment of clarity. My friends helped pull me out of that, and I went back to the psychiatrist. I stopped taking the pills. I went back to the psychiatrist, and I told him what these were doing. And he told me I had to take them no matter what. So let's say I got a little angry, and I threw them in his face, told him where to go. And he said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to heal myself. I'm tired of this system. And I really was. I was tired of it. And of course, at the time I was tired of everything. You know, I wasn't sleeping. So I began increasing my martial arts, which was kind of helping my performance, at least in my energy, more stretching. And I'd moved to Vancouver at this time, and my instructor out there who was teaching me Val Trudeau had noticed that I was having severe breathing issues. Mm-hmm. I was having a lot of stomach problems. And he started teaching me breathing exercises, which are pranayama, which is the breathing techniques of yoga. Mm-hmm. And I was waking up every night struggling to breathe. So what happened was I started to use these breathing techniques. I'd wake up about 3 o'clock in the morning with a very constricted chest, and I would do breathing exercises for about an hour, and it would put me into a deep state of meditation. Not the visual meditations that I was doing as a teenager, but a deep, deep meditation of self and you know, and spirit and the things that began opening up in me. I was at a friend's house one night, and they all went to bed early. I was staying the night, and I was kind of bored, so I sat in his living room and started doing this deep meditation. And I was just about to move back home at this point. A lot of changes were happening in my life. And this vibration took over my body. My whole body, it felt like every cell in my body, every atom in my body began to reach this hypercycle. And what I saw, I don't know if you've ever seen Lord of the Rings. Now this was way before Lord of the Rings ever came out in movie. It was like this eye that was a vortex where energy was channeling in and channeling out at the same time. Kind of like a black hole, except for energy that you can see also coming out. And it was like this pressure hit me right here, and metaphor, okay, it was like God basically just right there and downloaded all this information. I don't know what happened. It was like a jumble of sound, a billion voices in my head at once, and I felt like I was disintegrating. I felt like I was melting. And I collapsed. I woke up the next morning in a very weird state, but I felt very calm. I felt very sure that what happened to me was going to be something good. But what started to come to me wasn't. What happened was my mind started to reach amazing epiphanies about connections of the universe. But every time I had these epiphanies, I felt like I was shot in the head. The nerve reactions that began to occur. I remember one time I had when I was in the shower, and I collapsed in so much pain. Holding my head, I remember just screaming of the pain. What I began to realize was that my third eye was opening. Right. And it was opening very intensely, and the rest of my chakras weren't aligned. My energy wasn't grounded. My body couldn't handle the information, because information is energy. It still has movement, it still has mass, it's energy. And so it's still going to affect my nervous system. And it was at that moment that I realized that I had to strengthen my nervous system. I had to get my chakras aligned. I had to start grounding my energy. Or this would be like plugging a hairdryer into a nuclear reactor. It was going to destroy me. So I began intensifying my practice. I began my own self-practice at home, 3 to 4 hours a night. Kind of started losing my friends at this point. I didn't really hang out with them so much. I had to do this. It was so important. And this went on for years. And what I started to do, actually, was I started mixing, because I started studying so much yoga, and I was doing Kung Fu, and I was blending yoga and Kung Fu into a dance that was allowing me a freedom of movement. And my favorite band, it still is my favorite band, is this band called James from Britain. And their music itself is quite ecstatic. The lead singer is a yogi. He does Qigong. He does all these things too. So there's this alignment there. The lyrics are very profound. So as I began to dance with this music, I began using his voice and this is where I began realizing how important vibration was, to clear blockages. Because he can get up into these octaves that you feel after you've done, you're resonating up here. You're really resonating. And so I began to use that and channel that energy. I had a wonderful experience about a month and a half ago where I got to meet him and hang out with him for a while and get to explain this to him, you know, how I did use their artistic talent for myself to help heal myself. He did something similar, and he started telling me about this system called 5 Rhythm Dance, which I'm now starting to look into, and I think it's going to be the next level of what I'm doing, and to incorporate. And so, I don't want to get off topic here, but as I began to do these things, my body just began to get healthier and healthier. My emotions began to get healthier and healthier. I found this outlet where I could channel all of that excess garbage, really. You know, my mind wouldn't stop. Now, at the same time, I was doing a lot of study. I needed to direct my energy into these things. So I was reading anywhere from 6 to 10 books a month. Books that most people would consider not connected to each other. Mm-hmm. I remember my father sat me down one day and he said, look, you know, I think you're pretty scattered right now in what you're doing. You know, you're studying physics, you're studying ecology, you're studying, and now you're all over the place. Where's your focus? And I didn't know. Mm-hmm. But I said to him, I said, look, you need to understand that what I am doing here, everything I read, I'm seeing the interconnections, and I'm mapping them together, the interrelations, and I'm bringing them all together. They all have a focal point. I don't know what that focal point is yet, but I'm almost there. And that was Chicology. By bringing all of these studies together, I realized that, and this is the problem in our schools, the subjects are separated.
Yes.
Why? They shouldn't be separated. They're all interconnected, and we have a deeper understanding if they were taught that way. And, you know, rather than just saying science over here, anatomy over here, chemistry over here, you know, or whatever subjects, you know, even literature, yes. You know, all of these things. Literature helps to open portions of the brain that allow you to actually have a deeper connection and understanding to science. You know, mm-hmm. So the school system that I was brought up in was dividing my brain.
Yes.
It was making me only focus on one side of my brain. And this has been going on for a long time. You know, schools like Montessori schools or Waldorf schools and that, they try to bring the brain together, both sides, yes. So that it's the artistic and the academic coming together. And that's what Chicology is also about, you know.
So you've said Chicology now twice. Mm-hmm. Do you want to share with the audience, Chicology is something you've developed. Will you share with the audience what it is?
I would love to.
I mean, it's fascinating.
So Chicology, I don't want to call it a system,
okay.
Even though we're going to just call it that for now so that there's a focal point of understanding.
Okay.
It's more of an umbrella than anything else. The word Chi, I'll break it down. Okay, so the word Chicology comes from the word Chi, which means life force. The word ology, which is the study of. So Chicology means, the study of life force energy. Next step, what's life force? Life force is the energy that is derived from the activity of life. It's an ecosystem. It's ecosystematic. Mm-hmm. And the ancients, of course, they called it nature. It is nature. Mm-hmm. But we need a deeper understanding of nature on how all of these things coordinate together to be interrelated. When you get into a deeper understanding of Chi, you'll realize it's not a substance so much as it's a pattern. In fact, in some circles, we even say there's no such thing as Chi. That we use Chi as something that you can point to so that you understand, you know, the breakdown of these energies. But we want to get away from the breakdown, from that. Descartes did so much damage by trying to that reductionist, yes. You know, separate everything, yes. And we want to conjoin it. But there's a balance there because he has some logic. Break it up, then put it back together. That's what they forgot to really mention. So there's this old saying: before the study of Tao, the mountain was just the mountain and the river was just the river. During the study of Tao, the mountain was no longer the mountain, and the river was no longer the river. After studying Tao, yeah, the mountain's just the mountain, and the river's just the river. And so as we go through these deep understandings, there's this awe that comes forth.